Well, good morning. Happy New Year. Is it too late in the year to be saying that? Most of you haven't seen since last year, which when you use that phrase, it sounds like a long time ago. It's only a couple of weeks, but the year's flying already. Seems to be anyway. Last year, which, as I say, sounds like a long time ago, can't remember the exact date, I was going to check, but I didn't. Dylan preached on a topic, and it was our church anniversary weekend, and Dylan presented from the church council what the church council believed was to be our theme verse for the year. Now, hands up those who remember what that verse was. Have a look around, Dylan. Okay, see a few. Okay, let me help you. Psalm 46, verse 10, and it says, "Be still and know that I am God." So my encouragement to you is to memorise that, and not just to memorise it, but to put it into practice as well. See, when we were discussing, Dylan and Dave and I were talking about my preaching, I said, anything particular that you'd like me to preach on? The suggestion from those guys said, how about you set us off in reminding us what our theme verse for the year is. So that's what it is. Be still and know that I am God. I put it up in a few different versions there. So I think it's CV, Contemporary English Version, says, our God says, calm down and learn that I am God. Well, the Amplified Version says, be still and know, recognise and understand that I am God. Then there's the DLV. Do you know what the DLV is? David Loader Version. Go to the top of the class. It hasn't done the whole Bible yet, but this is my understanding of the verse. Stop. Cease doing things your way and put your trust in God. Now, when you stop and think about that, is that not a worthy theme verse for the coming year? To stop doing things your way, stop doing things my way, stop doing things our way, and put our trust in God. So, it's only 11 verses in Psalm 46, so I'd like to read them to you, and if you've got your Bibles, you might like to follow it through. Now, you'll probably remember most of the Psalms written by David. This one is not. So if you see at the top it says, for the directed music of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth, a song. Here it is, Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. Selah. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will not help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. The word occurs again. Selah. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. And here it is, folk. Be still and know that I am God. I'll be exalted among the nations. I'll be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. Now, purposely reading that word Selah, because when I was going through this and preparing, I've noted that some versions don't include the word Selah in them. In fact, even the NIV has a few different editions, and certainly one of the editions that I looked at the NIV does not include the word Selah. So what is Selah? What's it mean? Well, nobody knows. And that's probably why some of the versions omit it. So generally speaking, some people think it probably means pause and reflect, or like this one's a song, some people think, well, it's probably some musical instruction, like with emphasis or something like that. Whatever it is, it's the Selah means that there's a break there of some description. And so it's helpful for us, and I'm not going to redo Psalm 46. Go back and listen to Dylan's sermon, it'll be there. But what it means is that it breaks down this psalm into these three sections. Verses 1 to 3, ending in Selah, verses 4 to 7, ending in Selah, and verses 8 to 11, ending in Selah. And so it's helpful then, well, I found it helpful to try to find out, or to look at, say, what is the theme in each of these sections? And this is my understanding. These are the themes that I came up with. When you read it and study it, I come up with different themes. But this is what I came up with. Verses 1 to 3, the emphasis there is that God is our refuge. Verses 4 to 7, the emphasis there is God is our security. And verses 8 to 11, God is our peace. Now, when you put those three together, we get this amazing picture of God. That God is our refuge, God is our security, God is our peace. And so is it not worthwhile, when we consider these three qualities of God, that we take on board those words of Psalm 46:10, be still, stop, be still and know that I am God. I'm the God who is your refuge, God who is your security, God who is your peace, our God, our refuge, our security, our peace. So the very fact that this verse starts off with be still, generally, well, implied in that is that if the command comes to you to be still, to stop, means that something is going on. You agree? And so try to stop and think, well, what is going on round about that this command that God says to the people in this psalm to be still? And there's all sorts of things we can come up with. I tried to think of an all-encompassing word that talks about all the stuff that's going on round about us. And what's all of this that God would say to you and to me today? Be still. Well, I couldn't come up with a satisfactory word, and maybe you'll be able to help me and come up with a satisfactory word. But I've thought, well, some of the things, the causes of all that's going on around us, I initially said noise, because noise covers a whole lot of things. But it's more than that. It's noise and chaos and thoughtless activity. Now, why I'm saying thoughtless activity, because activity in itself is not wrong, but thoughtless activity is an issue, where we just run around and think as long as we're busy, then things are going well, without stopping and thinking about, why am I busy? What am I doing? Does this make sense? And more importantly, does it make sense as far as God's plan for me? Does it make sense in that regard? So I thought, well, what's a few things that are causes of noise, chaos, thoughtless activity, and so on? So I've come up with a few. And because there's a million other things, I put other there because there's other things in there. So I thought about anger. Anger is one of the things which preoccupies, which causes chaos. I don't know about you, but it just seems to me that our society is getting more and more angry. Road rage is becoming an increasing problem. domestic violence is becoming, well, it's always been there, but a problem as well as anger has been, and that we are living in this society where people just don't know or are uncertain, don't have the skills, how do I handle this emotion called anger? Because anger in itself, if it's rightly directed, whatever, can be a helpful thing, but it's out of control. It becomes something where God is saying to be still. But the opposite of anger, it seems to be like fear. And just as anger seems to be an increasing problem in our society, fear also seems to be an increasing issue in our society too. Was that not one of the key focuses of our state election just a couple of months ago, about fear of youth crime and a whole lot of other crimes and so on? But the fear of all sorts of things, the fear of death, the fear of illness, the fear of losing our job, the fear of losing our home, all sorts of things. And then I put in this one, karoshi. Excuse me if you're Japanese and I don't know how to say it properly, but a few years ago this word became an in vogue word. And there's a lot of articles, especially in management areas, where this word was being quoted. You see, in Japan, it was recognised that executives particularly were overworking and just going too hard, too fast on things, and actually suicide amongst executives was a key issue because of this overwork and just preoccupation with work and being unable to keep up with work. And so there's this Japanese word, which if you're in management circles, you've probably heard of it and maybe even used it, but generally it's understood to be, or to involve long working hours, job-related stress and poor work-life balance. But while that might be true for employment, would you agree that there can be karoshi in a whole range of areas in our life as well? This just where life seems so out of control. There are more and more gadgets that we have in our homes and in our lives, which are supposed to make life easier, but in fact it just seems to complicate life more and more and get us more and more busy. Self-reliance, entitlement, I deserve this, and so on, and a whole range of things. And so a whole range of things are going on round about us, and some of these things, or other things, will be applying to you and to me today. So my guess is there are folk here, sitting here this morning, having issues with anger. There are folks sitting here who have issues with fear, or with this whole area of self-reliance of, it's got to be me who does it, whatever. And this karoshi where life is just so out of control, where life is controlling me rather than I'm controlling life. And so this is what's going on round about us. And for all of us today, there's this noise, chaos, whatever going on round about us. And in the middle of all of this, you know what God is saying to you? God is saying, be still and know that I am God. Remember those three things that we said about God? Be still and know that I am God. I am refuge, security. I am your peace. And so we have all of this going on round about us, and we endeavour to address these issues that are going on. And we have all sorts of ways of trying to address all of these things. You go to any bookstore and see how many self-help books are there, and tapes and CDs and podcasts, whatever else, about how to address this noise, this chaos in our lives. Psychologists talk about a locus of control, about what's controlling my life, and they talk about a locus of control, whether that locus, the location is the locus, the location of that control, whether it's within me or whether it's outside of me. And so sometimes there's this tendency within us to say, there's all this noise going on round about me, I can control it. I won't get you to put your hand up, but how many of you set New Year's resolutions? And the next question, obviously, how many are still keeping them? You see, it's this, and nothing's wrong with New Year's resolutions, by the way, go for it. But this whole idea that I can have total control of my life. And we're told in our society today that whatever you want to do, you can do it. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. There's a theological word for that, and it's rubbish. Because that's just not true. Because you can't do everything or anything. Any red-blooded young Australian male who intends to go to heaven always dreamed that one day they'd wear the baggy green and play cricket for Australia. You agree? Except for two of our pastors, like Dylan and Dave, how did we end up with two guys who don't follow cricket and they still expect to go to heaven? I just don't understand that. So I used to dream that one day that I'd play cricket for Australia, and there's only one thing that ever stopped me from playing for Australia, and that one thing was I just wasn't good enough. You see, I just can't do any and everything. We have a medical specialist in our church, and let me assure you that if you need to see a medical specialist in his area of expertise, you'd much rather go to see him rather than to see me. We also have a number of bus drivers, I think 4 or more bus drivers in our congregation, and I just admire these men and women who just these gigantic machines through the traffic. I have trouble parking my wheelbarrow without bumping into things. And these guys, these people are just, these huge machines are going through. You would much rather they were driving you in the bus than me. You see, I can't do everything. In fact, it's a reality of life which we all need to accept, is that I can't do everything, but I can do something. And we need to understand this, that in this chaos round about us, is that there are some things which we can do something about, but there's a lot of stuff that we can't, that's out of our control. And so we have these 3 ideas of things that I can do. We have them, fight, that I'm going to stand up and I'm going to address this and I'm going to do it. Or this flight, I'm going to run away and hide from it or escape it. Or the faint, that I'm just going to fall over and collapse in the presence of it. So there's this locus of control internally that I can deal with all this that's going on round about us. But then there's another locus of control, this external one, which says I depend on others to help me through and addressing all of these things. And so some things like therapy, meditation, sometimes Eastern meditation, people try all of that, medication, substances, all sorts of things people endeavour to use. And once again, with a lot of these things, not all of them, a lot of them, there's nothing wrong with them, they're helpful. But in all of this, in all that's going on round about us, God says to us what? There's an external local locus of control depending on others, or there's an internal locus of control that I can do whatever I want. But God says, be still. Be still and what? And know that I am God. About these things about God, He's our refuge, He's our security, He's our peace. The things in this chaotic world in which we live. Now, I just want to say this as a important note here, is that what I'm not saying that abandon all these things and just depend on God. There are some sections of some well-meaning Christians who will tell us that. Don't go to the doctor, don't do this, don't do that, just depend on God. In fact, God can and will use others from time to time to help us in addressing some of these things. So read that note there, that if you are currently on medication or seeing a counsellor or anything like that. Don't stop that faith. Just keep it there, but just remember the perspective. God first. Remember that God comes first, and that God can and will use some of these other things from time to time as well. So there's this noise, God saying, be still and know that I am God. I want to look very quickly at 2 case studies in the Bible about being still and know that God is God. The first case study I've chosen is from 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 1, and to chapter 19 and verse 14. You probably know this story. It's a story of when Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal and Asherah on Mount Carmel. Let me just summarise the story very quickly. It's an exciting story to read. Elijah, he was the number one troublemaker in the eyes of the king, Ahab, and the queen Jezebel. So he was the number one troublemaker in all Israel. And he had a price on his head, and he had hidden. There's also a priest who'd stayed true to God but stayed in there. His name was Obadiah. He actually rescued some of them, 100 of them, and split them into 2 groups and hid them and fed them and so on. But Ahab and Jezebel were wicked people, leading God's people down to worshipping this false prophet Baal. And so along comes Elijah to confront these people, and this confrontation takes place on Mount Carmel. And so there's Elijah is one man, as man of God, and 850 of these other prophets. And chapter 18 and verse 21 is a key verse where it says, Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him. Folk, that's a key verse for you to stop and think about. Who's in control in your life? Don't waver between 2 opinions. If God is God, follow him. Whatever else, give that a miss. And so what happened then is that Elijah says, let's set up this competition to see who is really the true God. Slaughter a couple of animals, put them on a sacrifice. 850 prophets danced and carried on trying to call down fire from heaven. And midday came, nothing was happening. Elijah started to jeer them and said, go on, what's happening? Perhaps you sleep, yell a bit louder, all that sort of stuff. And nothing happened. And Elijah then, for his sacrifice, put on buckets of water, more and more and more. And then it says this, that Elijah prayed. And he prayed, and the fire came down, and his prayer was just simply this: O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. When that happened, all the people saw this, verse 39, they fell down and they cried out, the Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God. Who's this one? The one who says, be still and know that I am God. Well, Elijah ordered all these prophets to be killed. Ahab went and told his wife, Jezebel, queen, and Jezebel made this statement: by this time tomorrow, Elijah's going to be dead. Elijah hears this and he runs off scared. He's just faced 850 people, prophets of these false prophets, but one woman he runs away from. Fear, scared. Why did he run? What should he have done? He should have, at that time, immediately said, be still and know that I am God. Well, it's easy for you and me to say that because we weren't in that situation. Had we been in that situation, we may have gone maybe even a bit faster than Elijah ran out into the desert. And anyway, so they're after him. Elijah goes out, he's exhausted, God treats him a special way, and then God appears to him. And then this is what happens. This is what happens. God says, I'm going to, verse 11, chapter 19, Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord wasn't in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire came a what? Noah V says, the gentle whisper. We've often understood it. After that came the still small voice. You see, we need to understand that, folk, is that often we are looking for the spectacular to hear God. And sometimes we hear reports of spectacular things or observe them and say, hey, God must really be there. Look what's happening in that place. I want to say this, is that while God might appear in the spectacular, mostly, God comes to you and to me in a still, small voice. And that's why he says to us to be still and to know that I'm God. Don't worry about seeking after the activity and the spectacular and all the rest of it. Just stop where you are to be still and to know that I'm God. And God spoke to Elijah in that still small voice, and twice he says to him, Elijah, what are you doing here? Twice he says that. What are you doing here? Elijah's full of self-pity. I'm the only one left. And God says, I've actually reserved 5,000 or whatever other people who haven't bended their knee. There's stacks of people. You're not alone. But sometimes when we stop and we listen to the still small voice, God is going to be saying to you, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? There's maybe something that God wants to say to you and to me today. Second case study is in the book, in the New Testament example, in Mark chapter 4. Another story you know well. Jesus has been teaching all day. And after the teaching, he gets his disciples aside. And as is his model, there's the action of the teaching, then there's the reflection. He reflects with his disciples. At the end of that, it's been a full day. He says, look, let's go to the other side of the lake. And they all get into the boat. And Jesus is fast asleep in the back of the boat. Now you think, he's just been talking all day. What's the issue? But I just want you to realise this is that actually preaching and teaching really takes it out of you. You talk to any of the pastors, anybody who preaches, and they'll tell you that often we are brain dead afterwards. I remember reading once, and I can't remember where, but they said that half-hour preaching, you use as much energy as doing a half a day's physical labour. Now, I think that's probably more true for some preachers than for others, for sure. But Jesus has been at it all day, and he says to his disciples, let's go to the other side. Like they hop in the boat, Jesus is fast asleep. Other boats are with them. So there's this fleet of boats going over, and this amazing storm, this huge storm comes up. And so big a storm, the waves are breaking into the boat. Here are experienced fishermen, experienced boat people out there. They are afraid. So imagine what it must be like to be in something like that. Only a bit of a thing, and I'm out of there. But here's stuff where experienced fishermen who's faced all sorts of things, they're scared. Jesus is sound asleep. Why on earth is he sleeping? So they wake him up and say, Jesus, aren't you really concerned about what's going on here? Don't you care that we're all going to perish? Jesus wakes up and he says, speaks to the storm, and what's he say? Be still. And what was the result? The storm calmed. My sense is, implied in this, is that Jesus was not only saying to the storm to be still and to be calm, but he's also speaking to the disciples as well. Because when he calms the storm, he turns to them and he says, "Where's your faith, guys? What's going on? You've just gone through a whole day of teaching and I've reflected with you. And here we are, facing this storm, and you're scared. You've got the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords in the boat with you. What can happen? Jesus is with you." And it sometimes seems to me that Jesus wants to remind us as well, is that when we're in the biggest storm of our life, that sometimes he'll calm the storm round about us and he stills the storm, whatever that might be. But he also turns to us and says, "Where's your faith? I'm with you. Remember, I'm with you. Be still. Remember, I'm the God who is your refuge. I'm the God of peace. I'm the God who is your security. I'm with you. Where's your faith in all of this?" And so he says to be still and know that I am God. Well, folk, we're just about to set off on the rest of the year. The Church Council, in hearing from God, says, folk, both as the church and as individuals, this is our focus for 2025. Psalm 46:10, which says on 2:1-2, be still. That means everybody say it out loud. On 2:1-2, be still and know that I am God. 5 lessons and I'm done. Here they are. Number 1 is this: to make God your first choice, not your last resort. Isn't it so too often that in life we try everything else, and when nothing else works, we say, "I better pray about this." Make God your first choice, not your last resort. When faced with chaos, stop, look and listen before you start acting. Faced with chaos, all of these other things we've been mentioning and other things we haven't mentioned, just stop. Don't depend on yourself, on others. That can come later. But stop and look around and listen. God, is there something that you want to say to me in all of this? Number 3, the spectacular does not mean spiritual or God at work. It may, but it more than likely doesn't. So forget it. Look for God in the still small voice, in the quiet moments, not in the big rowdy things. Number 4, God may appear in the spectacular, but mostly as a still small voice. And the sacred trust in God. God is my, what did we hear from Psalm 46? God is my what? My refuge, my security, and my peace. To be still and to know I'm God. I don't know whether you followed, just this short story and I'm done. We followed about this young guy who got lost in the snowy mountains for 13 days. He and a couple of mates went out, he decided to take a few photos, went away from the group, got lost. So for 13 days he was lost and he was discovered just this last week. And amazing story, without going into all of that. But it's interesting that as I was reading that, there's an article parallel to it, says, this is what you do when you're lost. Have you ever seen a kid get separated from mum and dad in the shopping centre? Maybe it happened to you or your kids, we've seen it. But kids get lost, or they think they're lost. What do? They start running and screaming and yelling, Mum, Dad, whatever. Exactly what we do as adults, but in a different way. But it's interesting, this article said, if you get lost, you know what you do? The first thing you do is you stop. and take stock of the situation, and you start to look at all your options. We live in a chaotic world round about us. All sorts of noise, all sorts of things happening round about us. And God says to you and to me, stop, be still, and know that I'm God. Let's pray. It's not right that we should stop. So we've just been talking about. Silly to run on now. We're only going to pause for a couple of seconds now. When you go home, you might need to slip away somewhere and spend 5 minutes or an hour. Some of you will need a whole day away. Some will even need a week away to be still. To listen to God. So God, speak to me. I'm here, your servant, wanting to hear your voice. I want to do that today. And I'm just wondering whether even here this morning, there might be a person who has never, ever, ever trusted God. As you've been talking today in the chaos of sin in your life, you've realised, I've got to stop and to recognise God. If God is God, follow him. What I'm doing now is just not working. Right where you are, you can give your life to Jesus. If you do that, share it with one of the pastors or somebody else in leadership in the church that you can pray and share together. Many of us, we're just rushing through life. God is saying, stop, be still, and know that I'm God.